You break it down based on and we can match it up with it's just figuring out how to. You don't want to get can't wait.
You got some giveaways here? Yeah. I'm broadcasting, by the way. Hello. I don't think they can hear you. They can't see you. They're seeing the screen. I'll be turning this light out so you can. Yeah, I sure do, man. Yeah. Hey, it's like I was in place. Boom.
John Marks from the SharePoint group says something.
Thank you. How do you know? See, work with you now? Yes. Awesome.
So it's my migration. Yeah, I did my shit like really fast. My shit was done in like 10 minutes.
Feel free to move up. You don't have to. I'm not using a microphone, so
You can put all your stuff back there so it's turned around.
right. So feel free to move up.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to good afternoon. Welcome to the November edition of the National SQL Server Users Group. I'm Robert Burrell. I'm one of our chapter leads. This is Lewis Davidson. If you don't know us, we're the chapter leads. We have Shelby Nixon, who is also on the board, and Jersey, who helps out extensively. But a little bit more volume. More volume. You can't hear you. We have no audio. We were lazy this month, and I had a kid 3 weeks ago, so we don't have the usual class slides that we normally have. But we did have the past summit last week of October. It was an excellent event. I did not get to go because, like I said, I had a aforementioned child.
Aforementioned child?
The kid was literally born on the first day of the convention.
Could have went to the second day. I like it.
Anyway, so that went very well, and if you don't know, next year they will obviously have another event. Best time to sign up for it is in the next 2 or 3 months. It will be the cheapest to pay for it then. Usually it's closer to like $1,000, $1,200 for the event. But once June rolls around, it'll be closer to $2,000. So you can save yourself several hundred dollars to get there. Also a good time to kind of pitch that to your boss, maybe if your company's willing to pay for you to go. Since budget reasons, things like that. Does anybody have any job openings that they'd like to speak about? Yes.
Chad with DBA and Server account. We have an opening for an upper level DBA. Talking after we'll chat about the details of the job, Jordan, more of the job. So,
Awesome. Anybody else?
Dixon Resources, Shelton Dixon. We are looking for a couple T-SQL developers. A lot of our clients, or two of our clients, are doing quite a bit of ETL work in stored procedures. And so they're looking for people that have very strong T-SQL programming experience. You're going to be dealing with a lot of EMR data.
Any of that. Fantastic. All right. Okay. How many of you are database administrators? DBAs. Okay. And what about business users? Fantastic. Developers, straight up. All right. Any of you SharePoint admins? You can be one. You can be more than one here. So don't admit it. Yeah.
Not that kind of group.
What?
Not that kind of group.
Yeah, I understand.
We're reluctant SharePoint.
Reluctant. Oh, obviously, yes. That's what this presentation's for. What about SharePoint experience? How many of you are currently using, let's say, SharePoint 2013, latest released? Okay. Office 365. Any of you on SharePoint Online?
As a user.
As a user, yeah. SharePoint 2010. 2010. Okay. 2007. Yes, sir. Okay. Let's see if there's some real warriors in here. 2003? No, good. Man, I do have a client on 2003. I can't get them off. Anyway. All right. So here's our agenda for today. We are going to walk through, we're going to show a SharePoint install demo. Okay, I'm going to fire that off first, and then we'll come back to it at the end. We'll talk a little bit about what is SharePoint, SharePoint databases, configuration for SQL, server maintenance, and SharePoint configuration. Does that sound okay for agenda? Anything you see big, huge missing hole there? All right, here we go. Like I said, first thing, SharePoint install demo. So who's crossing their fingers that it's actually going to work? I need like 15 of you. All right, so I've got SQL running here, no databases, no user databases, right? Okay, just proving that I'm not doing any smoke and mirrors kind of thing, all right? So I'm going to kick off. I do have my, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, I do have my SharePoint install scripted out in PowerShell, so we'll come back to it. Who's crossing fingers? And who's really wishing that this won't work? Just for, okay, all right. Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It's like, I really want this to fail just to see what you do. I am prepared, sir. Travis. All right. Let's talk a little bit about what is SharePoint. Sometimes the first interaction for a DBA or those developers with SharePoint is kind of like the guy over there on the left-hand side. You're kind of looking on the outside looking in, right? Other people are doing stuff. There's a C-level person or a manager who said, we're going to do this, and give that person full permissions, make it happen, right? So they come to you and say, I need to be full admin rights on your servers as well as in SQL, right? They say that because I need to install this and it requires that. Well, hopefully today I'll give you some tools to help combat that a little bit and help your peers understand and that, that you should be involved, right? Okay. Oh, SharePoint. It is a valuable tool. I know it has a little bit of a bad reputation, and I think that's because we SharePoint administrator type people have really not fostered that relationship with the platforms people, right? And said, just like I mentioned before, hey, give me whatever I need to make this happen. And just didn't do it the right way. SharePoint has been around since 2001. And as you hopefully know, it can quickly become a business critical application, which then sometimes means you get called really early or late, depending upon, if you're a night owl, of when things are not happening the way they should. Different versions and deployment types. So on premises, we have SharePoint Foundation. This is in 2013. SharePoint Foundation, which is a free product. And Microsoft has announced that Foundation will not be included in 2016. So 2013, right now, as it stands, is the last one that will have a free version of SharePoint. And then SharePoint Server Standard and SharePoint Server Enterprise. And then, of course, we have, and they usually come out looking like this, right? In an install, you have nice, a little bit of information at the front of what it is, and then stuff. Lots of nice GUIDs, right? GUIDs. How many of you are GUID people versus GUID? GUID, okay. What about GUID? Okay. Hey, there's people that raise their hands for both. Thank you very much. Boo. Okay, whatever. So we're going to talk about how to install. In fact, when we come back to the SharePoint demo, I'm going to show you that it doesn't have to look like that. Okay? All right. Types of databases. You've got the configuration database, which actually, when you create it, you can name it whatever you want without the GUID. I'm going to look at you every time I say that. Configuration database, you have one per SharePoint farm, and that does exactly what you think it does. It has the information about the way the farm is configured. We have the central admin content, which is the central administration website that manages SharePoint, has its own content database. Content databases for all your other sites, okay? And then service apps, so Excel services, search, etc. There's a lot of them, but they each have their own database. Well, not all services have their own database, but a lot of them do. And like search has more than one. So I mentioned before, web apps can have more than one content database, but each site collection, we talked about what that is, right, can only be in one database. Okay, so you can't span those, and I'm going to talk about why that's important here in a second. So you can have many databases on a web app, but only one site collection per database. I'm sorry, one site collection in one database. A database can hold more than one site collections, okay? But it can only be contained in one database. Clear that up. All right. Oh, I just said that. But one thing is database size. So up until 2013, SharePoint 2013, the advice was, actually the requirement was, if you wanted support from Microsoft, that you had to keep your content databases below 200 gigs. Okay, so if you had a content database that was larger and you called Microsoft for support, they would tell you, get your content database below 200 gigs, and then we'll help you. Okay, so in 2013, they revised that a little bit to say you can have content databases larger, actually up to 4 terabytes. And we'll talk about the scenario where you would have that. And I'll let you decide whether you would want to back up and all that with a 4 terabyte database. But if we have databases that are over 100 gigs for site collections that are collaboration, so where people are uploading, downloading content, editing documents, that kind of thing frequently, then we need to do a little bit of planning to make sure that we don't go over that 200 gigs for those collaboration sites. All right, any questions about that? SharePoint databases? All right. SharePoint configuration. All right, have your SQL Server dedicated to one SharePoint farm instance, right? So you need an instance, one instance per SharePoint farm. And my advice is don't use that instance for anything else, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. And we'll hear groans from the back, I'm pretty sure, because Robert, last time he saw this presentation, groaned and fussed at me, and I took the brunt of his Microsoft wrath. But So you need a dedicated SQL instance for SharePoint, and you're only going to put one SharePoint farm using that instance. Watch those resources, right? Because we know that each instance has configuration for memory and CPU, right? Before you install SharePoint, you're going to create a record in DNS for your SQL box, okay? That's not your SQL Server name. Call it SharePoint SQL or SP SQL or something like that. And then that's the name SharePoint's going to use to point to, right? So you probably know very well when you start moving database servers around, you don't want things pointed to IP addresses or server names. You want it pointed to that C name or a record, or you can create a SQL alias. And you probably know this when I talk to SharePoint people, they don't realize this, but SQL aliases should be configured on the SharePoint servers, not on SQL, right? So on the SharePoint servers, you create a SQL alias, and then it works magically, right, when you move your databases. It's great. All right, so I talked about collaboration. This I want to bring up here profiles of databases. So as you know, there's different types of database usage, right? For SharePoint in particular, we have collaboration sites that are, like I said, heavy I/O, right? Lots of writes, lots of reads. There's types that are mostly reads, like record centers or your intranet homepage. That's going to be seen a lot, but there's not going to be a lot of writes there usually. Sometimes you might have that configured to allowing people to interact and edit content, but usually it's only a handful of people, maybe one or two that will be editing that. So that's going to be on a low write, right? So mostly reads. So for your collaboration site content databases, you want to keep those still. The advice is under 200 gigs for 2013. We want to monitor SharePoint content databases for resources, right? We got to make sure that we're not blamed for when SharePoint slows down, okay? Because when SharePoint slows down, there's three typical areas of why it's slowing down, right? There's the SharePoint servers, maybe they're running out of memory or something, the web apps or the web front ends. The network, maybe there's high network traffic or there's some problems with switches, routers, whatever. But the third is database, right? And honestly, in my line, database is the most frequently caused problem, right? That's causing the problem. I don't know if I should call on you. Yes, Robert.
So speaking of database I/O,
yeah.
Whenever you format this to put a database on whenever you're going to put a database on this for SharePoint, is there a different allocation, or is it a recommended allocation unit size for whatever you format this for?
Is there a recommended allocation size for a disk when you're formatting it for databases, for SharePoint databases?
Yes.
I don't know the answer to that. I'll make a note of that and look it up for you. I do not know the answer. Thank you, sir.
So,
yes.
Why? So when you say instance, you don't mean server. So you could have multiple instances on the same server.
Definitely, multiple instances on the same server. Yep.
And why does it need to be dedicated? What's the connection there?
Yeah, I'm going to cover a little bit of that here coming up. If you'll allow me to pause you for a second and get to that. Is that all right?
Not allowed.
Yeah, not allowed.
No, that's cool.
Answer now. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about that.
It's not the database's fault. We're coding fault. That's why it's slow.
We are recording this, so I will not acknowledge that would be true. The SharePoint product team does a great job, and they would never cause that problem.
And the app that needs 20 databases plus problematic stuff. Go ahead. Move along.
Moving right along. Any other questions about SharePoint configuration here? Okay. All right, SQL configuration. let's move on. We'll talk about the configuration steps and settings that are necessary or best practice, right? Okay, so we talked about this. We need a new instance for every SharePoint farm, not on the SharePoint server. Okay, they should be separate. All right, if it's a dev box, you can get away with it, but even when you move to testing or QA, you need them separate. Mostly for performance, right? I mean, you're going to be putting it on the same disk. I mean, using the same memory. Let's separate it out. Okay.
Even if that's 60 CPUs and 2 terabytes of RAM.
Even. I would say if you have a server like that, then either it should be your SQL Server box and you shouldn't put SharePoint on it, or it should be your VM host, right? Okay. All right. Okay, so when setting up SQL Server, when you're going through there and you're clicking next, done, when you're setting up, you don't do that, right? Right? Okay, good. It's best to set the correlation to Latin 1 general, case insensitive, accent sensitive, const sensitive, and width sensitive. And that's up on your setup. When you're running the setup, that you need to select that. It's not the default. Okay? And the reason why is you can't change this setting on the model database once you install SharePoint, once you install SQL. So every time SharePoint has to create a database, it has to change that. Okay? So yeah. So it's you don't want to deal with that. You want to, and because we're installing this instance just for our SharePoint farm, we can make this change, right? Okay. All right. So file placement. By default, where does SQL install put the data files for databases? What drive by default? System drive, right? C, right? System,
And the program files.
right. Exactly. It's fun, right? Program files. Okay, so where does it put by default? Want to put the logs for databases? C drive. Yeah, and backups? Yeah, the system drive. Wonderful. So we don't do that, right? I got it. Maybe we do. That's right. It depends. Hopefully it's nothing more than test or development, but for when I'm setting up SQL, I start with 5 drives and go from there. You can get away with less, but that's where I start. So just follow best practices for setting SQL up for drives. RAID 5 is good for backups, RAID 10 for databases, basic best practices, right? Data, logs, tempdb, all on different drives. Okay. Model database. Let's increase the initial size, set it to megabyte growth instead of percentage in full recovery. Tempdb. The recommendation has been that the number of database files or data files for the tempdb is the number of processor cores that you have for your instance. This has changed a little bit as processor cores have gone up. There's actually this threshold where it actually starts affecting performance. So I put an asterisk there. I've got a nice little note of a TechNet article talking about that. tempdb and simple recovery. And server memory, RAM usage. Again, we need to be watching that, right? This is very important. If the SQL Server the instance is running out of memory, it is going to slow down, right? We all know that, and it will be the blame for SharePoint slowness. So set it up correctly first time, right? Okay, so all of that, if that all didn't convince you to have your own instance for your SharePoint farm, this one will. The MaxDOP, maximum degree of parallelism. Anybody want to explain what that is? Anybody? Yes, I will call on you. You keep raising your hand, Robert. Explain what max degree of parallelism is.
Trying to be interactive.
You're doing great, man. I love it. I just wish you were on the front row so I can throw stuff at you.
So max degree of parallelism is the number of cores that SQL Server will allocate to a query.
Yep.
If the cost threshold for parallelism is exceeded in seconds, which is also another server setting.
Yep.
That's how many threads it will use to run.
That's right.
A parallelized query.
That's right. So how many threads on that SQL will use? It won't install if you have it set to 2 or more. You must set max stop equal to 1. Okay? Some chuckles in the back. That's great. And this is where you find it. But yeah, max stop has to be equal to 1, or SharePoint will stop install and say set max stop equal to 1. A friend of mine, well, I don't know if I'll call him a friend, but a friend of mine on the last presentation, he may be sitting in the back, asked, well, can't you just change this after install? Sneaky DBA back there. The reason why it checks to see if max stop is equal to 1 is that it needs it to be that way. So yes, you could change this after SharePoint install, but you are asking for trouble, okay? And SharePoint wise, not SQL, right? This is the wonderful coding I think that you were talking about.
How does that change the input and output?
Yeah, this SharePoint's wonderful.
Wow.
Yeah. Max stop equals 1. What? Man, yeah.
Why doesn't it just set it to default?
I'm sorry?
Why doesn't it just set it to 1 by default?
SharePoint or SQL?
SQL.
Yeah. Because typically, if you're doing this right, you shouldn't be using an account to install SharePoint that has those permissions on SQL to do this. And I'm going to talk about permissions here next slide. But it just doesn't do it because the best practice is you shouldn't be able to do it. Okay? Any questions? Anybody else want to complain? All right. Awesome. Permissions. SharePoint admins themselves do not need permissions on SQL servers, on SQL instances. Okay? So your admin should not be able to log into your SQL box with their account. Okay? Period. Shouldn't. They don't need it. The service account, so how many service accounts do you, people that have SharePoint, do you have for SharePoint to run everything? How many? One account? Fantastic. Anybody else?
I believe I have 6.
Okay. So if you fill out the best practice, there's a best practice worksheet that Microsoft has provided. It says if you use this, you know, so you can calculate how and write in your service account so you have it all printed out. Nothing could go wrong with a written out service account and password list, right? The recommended, last time I looked, was 17 if you have a full install of SharePoint, right? If you're running a bunch of web apps, 17. Okay? It's a lot. So one of those is the install account. This account should be only used for installing SharePoint and installing service packs. Okay? All right? So what you do is you give that account, the install account, permissions to log on to the SharePoint server, as well as giving it the security admin and DB creator roles in SQL, in the SQL instance, okay? Once SharePoint is installed, then that account is actually disabled in AD. You don't delete it, you disable it, okay? Then during install, the second account that you put in during the install is the farm account. And this account is the one that gets DB creator and security admin, fixed admin roles, fixed server roles, as well as it's the DB owner for all SharePoint databases. And as another friend, same friend asked last time I presented this, was, well, that's fine, but can I take DBO off of those databases for that farm account? Because he actually just gave a presentation about how nobody should have DBO rights, basically, on any databases except, that your one account, right? Your one admin account. That was his presentation. And here's how to do it. My answer was kind of the same thing as MaxDOT. Yeah, you could take it away, but SharePoint does check these things, and you're going to create instability, okay, in your farm. Okay? But I loved his presentation. It was great. How was that? Was that a good? I keep using you. Sorry.
Technically, my session says nobody needs.
Oh, needs, right. Sorry. Okay. Other service accounts will be added the farm account will then have the ability to add those other service accounts to those databases, right? Because it's the owner for those databases, so it's going to be able to create other service accounts to be able to access it, like search and et cetera. And then I've got a nice technical article there talking about all those the security roles that need to happen. Okay. Any questions about security in SQL? So the next time someone walks up to you and says, I need to install SharePoint, and they say, just give me any old instance, you say, oh, sorry, no, you need your own. And then they say, well, okay, fine, give me my own instance, but I need full rights on it. You say, no, actually you don't. And then you can refer back to my presentation and say, this is what you need. Okay? All right, SQL Server maintenance. How are we doing on time? Ooh, gotta hurry. Yeah. All right. So it's really important for the business units to talk to IT, right? They've got a site collection and they're about to upload 400 gigs of videos into it. Okay, this is something important to talk to your SharePoint admins as well as your DBAs, right? Database growth, we have to plan and pre-grow quotas. And this is on the SharePoint side, quotas and number of site collections per database, you can set that. So if a site collection is going to be large, you think, then probably on the database in SharePoint, you set it and say, I only want one site collection to be able to be created in there. Okay, so no other ones get added to that database. Again, we talked a little bit about profiles, about those sites have different profiles. Some are heavy write and read, and others are just heavy on read. Those can be, like I said, those heavy on read, Record Center, sometimes your intranet homepage. Those can be, again, up to 4 terabytes. If you want to back that up and can in a rather quick manner, fantastic. Good for you. But we need to plan for those, okay? Backups. Okay, so location of backups, right, is important. So if I need a backup, I need to retrieve a backup and restore something, I need it to be able to get to it quickly, okay? But I also need to test them, okay? How many of you test your databases every month you test your databases? Okay, fantastic. Okay, let me define what I mean by test. That's probably a good place to start. Test is you actually restore the database and make sure the content is still there. Okay, so you restore it to a test environment or a separate instance, and you test and make sure it actually would function if you did a restore. Okay, that's testing. So how many of you do it once a month? You, sir, are a wonderful man, and he tests his backups every month. How about every quarter? Every 3 months? Every 6 months? All right, I got one on 6 months. How about every year? And I got 2 more. What do y'all do?
Developers.
Oh, you're developers.
Oh, yeah, not me. I would test it every month if it was my job.
If it was your job.
If actually having to do it counts as a test, then yeah, I do it like this.
Yeah.
At least we'll see.
Yeah, so when you do a backup of your database and it says it was successful, that's not testing. That doesn't mean it actually will work when you restore. Okay? What's that? Log shipping? What about it?
Does that count as a test?
I don't know. That's probably better answered by our wonderful DBA friends around here. I don't know that I would count it. Yeah, I don't know if I'd count it.
Corrupted data, so
Yeah.
you have to get back and be corrupted.
Yeah. So if it is corrupted and you're relying on log shipping, yeah. All right. And then also simple versus full recovery. One thing I get called every once in a while, and it's, Daniel, please help. We're in an emergency. SharePoint's down. The drive on SQL Server is full, right? And it's because of logs for SharePoint databases, because they're so huge. And they say, should we just change it to simple and do a backup? Well, you could. And sometimes maybe that's a fast way of doing it simple, do a backup, truncate the log, and start again. Okay, maybe that's one way, yes. But that's not a long-term solution. And I think only should be done by someone who's doesn't know better. But so our SharePoint databases should be in full recovery. If it's a production database and you rely on that content, then yeah, it should be in full. So we should be managing that toward best practice. But those logs will become huge if you do not manage them correctly. Huge. Okay. All right. So for SharePoint production databases, this is the other fun part. Don't open them. Don't edit them. Don't query them. Just treat them as a black box. Yeah, I've got some people out there going, yeah, this is an awesome presentation, Daniel.
You say black or black?
Oh, black. Yeah, treat them as a black box, really. So there's several knowledge base articles that talk about what you should not be doing with your SharePoint databases. Adding triggers, changing, deleting any primary foreign key relationships, changing or deleting any stored procedures, adding new stored procedures, any of those things. Okay, and this is just one knowledge base article. There's others. So the advice here is, yeah, just don't do your normal best practice for maintenance, for backing up, but don't go in there and start playing around with SharePoint databases. Okay.
So you look at the DMVs for missing indexes and just leave them missing.
There are, and we could talk a little bit more. I am running out of time, but there are some things we can do to fix with indexes, rebuilding those. Yes, we can do some of those things. Okay.
But not adding.
Yes.
But not adding them.
Not making it faster.
Right.
That's
Okay, fragmentation. So we know databases get fragmented, tables, indexes, as well as file system. So we do need to watch that and fix it when it does become fragmented, okay? So again, maintenance, those type of maintenance does need to go on, right? But we're not opening tables and editing them, right? Okay, any questions about that? SQL Server maintenance. Okay. All right, summary, and then we'll get to the demo and show you, cross our fingers and hope that it actually worked. So here's just some things we talked about today that you can refer back to for some of the major points. Max stop equals 1, yay! I like it when DBAs go, oh, that's just bad.
Actually, that's the best thing you've told us today.
Yeah.
That's not terrible advice in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah. So you asked the question why you need your own instance. All I have to say is max stop equals 1, and hopefully that'll get you and say, okay, maybe yes. All right. our next slide is the SharePoint install demo.
No chance that's part of the licensing fee for SharePoint, is it?
No. Yeah. If you think they don't do this for money, then, all right. So look, it actually worked. We have a SharePoint site. Don't worry about that red health analyzer thing. It's because I'm using, well, SharePoint is on the SQL box here. This is all, and it's a domain controller. And I'm using one service account, like my friend up here up front, for all services. Right. This is for demo purposes, sir. This is not even dev. Yes. This is what you're not supposed to do. Yeah.
It just became 3 laptops.
Yeah. So let's fire this up. All right. Remember, there was no databases, and now there are. Okay. So obviously, so that it would actually install in the time limit here, I didn't run all the services, but your SharePoint databases shouldn't have GUIDs or GUIDs or any of that other stuff. Okay. It doesn't have to. See? It doesn't have to. Okay? So I've got config database I talked about, Citra admin. I've got my sites running. That's the portal content, the home page, secure store and state service. That's all I saw, like I said, for it to get to running. But, we can do this where all of our databases, all 20 plus of them, won't have funky names. Okay? Is that exciting? Are you excited yet? Are you not entertained? All right. All right, so there's my thank you slide. I don't have my blog address up there. That's okay. You can find it. It's nosharepoint.com, like K-N-O-W, not the N-O one. Yeah, K-N-O-W. And I'll put the slides up today on my blog. Okay. Any last questions for me? Anything? Love to. I've got to go find who the winner is for if anybody, wanted to be part of the giveaway. And I'll do that after Lewis talks. But any last questions? Like I said, I'll hang around for a few minutes if you do. All right. Thank you very much.
I think the winner is whoever doesn't have to do this and